Welcome to Tales from the Tarot podcast, where you can learn about the tarot not from a book, but from people's lives. I'm your host, Tara, and I invite you to join me and my guests as we break down the human experience through story, myth, and archetypes. Kelli McCallister is a tarot reader and yoga teacher who's practiced yoga and meditation for almost 30 years. She published her first book, Attending to the Bones, A Midlife Journey, in 2021. She spends her time volunteering in urban greening initiatives, farm-based education, food forest development, and pollinator-friendly landscaping projects.
Woo!
Yeah.
The sun in the house. So for anyone who's listening, I'm here with Kelli McCallister today, and she is a lovely, lovely person and tarot reader who I met last year. We're in this delightful little group called the Lingerie Book Club. It was just such a cool little group for Louisville. We just got to meet online and wear cute little lingerie and talk about embodiment and share embodiment books together. So I'm excited to learn more about the sun card, and I brought two sun cards with me. I've got the Rider-Waite Smith deck and the Marseille because I find it really interesting how different the images are on both of these. You know, one of them has the Rider-Waite Smith version has a little child on the back of a horse riding a white horse, like this naked baby, you could say, or naked toddler riding a white horse with the sun and these big sunflowers. And it just looks very magical and like free, like there's a lot of freedom. But then in the Marseille deck, it's actually two characters, and one of them's helping the other, and there's a brick wall in the background. It's like they're helping each other get over this wall. So they're just quite different, I feel like.
That's interesting. I had never seen that other one before.
Yeah, the Marseille.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so interesting how there's two people on the Marseille and then one person on the Rider-Waite Smith.
Right. The Rider-Waite, you know, I just think it's so funny. There's a naked, like you said, toddler riding bareback on this horse and like in this posture of like with arms flung out, like I'm not holding on to anything, you know, like, yeah. So it is magical, like, you know, just complete trust and nothing can go wrong. And, you know,
Yeah, like no saddle, not strapped on or anything.
no, just kind of there, just magically. The other one actually makes more sense to me because I always think of the sun in relation to other cards. I don't really think of it by itself because it by itself it's already a kind of self um, self-sustaining, self-illuminating. So it doesn't, it's like it's not affected by other cards, but it's very influential in a spread. It affects all the other cards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like it would affect all the other cards in like a super joyful, positive way.
Yeah, and it makes sense, like the one person helping the other over the wall, that makes complete sense to me because the sun is often, you know, let's face it, there are a lot of cards in the tarot that aren't what you would call positive. And so the sun is there as like a strengthening or a bolstering or like a more joyful or hopeful helping through a situation rather than just everything in the world is great and there are no problems ever again, you know?
Right. And I like how I like how they have this brick wall, but it's not a very high wall. It's a very short wall that these two figures could easily jump over. They could easily play on it. They could jump over it. They could easily, build more if they wanted to. But it's sort of like saying, don't worry, the sun's going to rise again the next morning. There's no obstacle that's too high to get over. Like the sun will come up again and you'll find a new answer, a new solution to the problem. And we can always build on what we know and something like that.
Yeah, what are they standing on? Are they in the middle of
Like,
water? They're
yeah,
standing on the-
yeah,
Okay.
it's actually water.
So they're kind of surrounded by water too.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I like water in there as like a balancing element for the sun because the sun needs that kind of cooling energy to balance it out.
Yeah. Yeah. The emotional part of us, I guess, so that we don't get too arrogant.
Right. Yeah, arrogant or just dried out or just burnt.
Yeah. Burnout when we're like trying too hard, maybe. Yeah. Interesting. Well, do you feel like you're ready to dive into the questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So, first question is what drew you to the Sun card? Why did you choose it?
Um, well, I love the sun. I mean, who doesn't like seeing the sun card in their tarot spread, first of all? But just as a physical object, like I've always been a sun worshiper. I think I'm pretty yin. And so I really crave that warmth and light of the sun. And on days when it's cloudy out, I tend to be my mind can be a little more foggy. I like the clarity of the sun. I like the definiteness of the sun. And I just feel like the sun, with human beings, it has so many effects on our physical bodies. Um, with our pineal gland, it regulates our sleep and regulates all of our hormones and gives us vitamin D. And we get sick without the sun.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's just what can you say? It's like one of the very basic things about our lives. It's the thing that sustains all life. Like we can't do without it. And yeah, and I feel like I'm not a sun person, like personality in terms of, well, I mean, we'll have to talk about like the kind of conventional understanding of sun, in terms of like Hollywood and charisma and people who are just centers of attention. Like that's one interpretation of the sun, but there are many others. Like there's also just the kind of life-giving, much more subtle and more let's say understated aspect of the sun.
Yes, that reminds me of like the father energy, that's sort of like the generous father archetype, he's kind of in the background, but he's just very giving.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he gives money to his children, but he doesn't want recognition for it, or like just makes me think of like those kind of archetypes that are generous or like sustaining. I want to make a big deal about it.
Yeah. And I mean, anybody can be anybody else's son, right? Like if there's a child, you can be the son for a child. You're just like that figure in the child's world who's like all encompassing, warm, gives a lot of support and encouragement. So yeah, that goes along with the father figure, but anybody can be the son for anybody else, really. And I think it's about like unconditional love and support.
I love that. So let's dig deeper into the whole archetype then. So what does the sun mean to you as an archetype?
Um, well, it's what I think about is there's so many, historically, like in yoga, in the Vedas, the sun's always been worshipped and they have a million names for the sun. And then when you do the yoga namaste, Surya Namaskar, the sun salutations, and each pose is a different like position of the sun in the sky and has a different name.
Mhm.
And then there's there's the Christ archetype, where Christ is the kind of a sun being. That's more like esoteric, mystical Christianity, not so much what you would hear if you went to church.
Right.
But yeah. And most of the archetypes that, involving the sun, I think involve some kind of sacrifice on the part of a being, like the being sacrifices themselves to become this all giving, life sustaining presence.
That's interesting.
I think in Egypt, it was like Horus was the sun figure. But on a more superficial level, people could talk about actors and actresses, singers like Leonardo DiCaprio. He seems like a pretty sunny kind of person. He's blonde and like charismatic, but that's just really like the more superficial idea.
Right. Yeah, it's that idea of being the center of the world. Like the sun is we call it the solar system. The whole system is based off the sun because the sun's in the center. So it's about people that can be in the center of everyone's attention and kind of naturally be there in that place.
Yeah, and everyone else is just like standing around them, basking in their
Orbiting.
glow. Yeah,
Yeah, orbiting around them.
right.
I like how you brought up the Christianity. That's big, like the whole solar deity thing. I feel like that is so big in the span of the history of the world. Like that has taken center stage for so long. I feel like we're just now like at the tip of the iceberg, or like just now starting to maybe like come out of that, like maybe starting to be at the very, very beginning of crossing into a new phase where the goddess is coming alive more and being recognized in the West more. But I did find it surprising that there are a lot of female sun deities. If you look, I don't know, I Googled it the other day and there were so many. I was like, wow, I didn't know there were female solar deities in all these different countries.
Really? I didn't know that either.
Yeah, like Egypt, Africa, Japan. I think Japan, she's a really big deal. But yeah.
That is interesting because I've always thought of the sun as a more masculine energy, more, young.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, interesting. Never heard that.
I do think it's a big point of confusion, the whole yin and yang thing, because that's Taoism. But in the other structures like Tantra, the masculine would be more cool and calm, which is more like the moon energy, or like the yin of Taoism. So yeah, it's just interesting when I think of these female solar deities, I'm like, oh, okay, that's Shakti. That's in the Tantra view. They're like the Shakti. They're like the expressive, like creative and the energy, which is it's just interesting how all these feminine and masculine archetypes can be like flipped and spun into.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, if you think about it, with the sun being life sustaining and life giving, that does make sense with the feminine, especially, new life, like in the card with the baby on the horse. Babies can't survive by themselves. And, it's really usually the mother who's helping them through those first few years.
Yeah. And the baby on the Rider-Waite Smith card looks pretty happy about that. Like,
He does. I love his little headdress with the red feather coming up.
oh yeah. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and even the banner that he's holding, it's just so like improbable. It's like all twisted up, and It's just a red. It looks like a blanket. Like it doesn't have any symbols on it or anything, you know.
You know what it makes me think of is play.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole archetype of playfulness, adults being able to find the playful side.
Absolutely. Yeah, with those big sunflowers.
Yeah, and when you talk about the archetype of the celebrity, like Hollywood and stuff, they
Mhm.
do get to kind of play for their job in a sense. I mean, can you imagine just getting to like read scripts and be an actor? I mean, I'm sure it's hard work. I absolutely am sure it takes a lot of hard work, but like still you're getting to just play a character like
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when you put the sun, you know, you put it next to some of these really more serious or intense cards, like the tower and, you know, death and the three of swords. And
Yeah. What do you think the sun next to the tower would mean?
I think it's like, you know, you're having that tower moment where everything's collapsing on you, you know, kind of unexpectedly. And the sun is just there like, okay, everything's going to be okay eventually. Like you're going to get through this. You're going to handle this. You got it.
Yeah, there are good things ahead.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and go on to the next question. So tell us a tale of the sun archetype in your life, a time that you connected with the sun or had a sun experience or really embodied this archetype.
Okay, well that's a good segue. So my when my father died in 2014, he was a sun figure. I mean, you were talking about the son being a kind of generous father figure. Well, that's who my dad was. We were really close, and I was pretty devastated when he died. And shortly after that, I went to Ecuador for I guess it was about 3 weeks. I was in a cloud forest, and I was by myself, and I realized as I was, you know, in this cloud forest by myself that my marriage wasn't in a very good place. Um, and so when I got home, the feeling became stronger. I knew like this wasn't gonna work anymore. I feel like that was the sun. So one thing about the sun we didn't talk about is that it shines light on everything. So it's like when the sun is there, you can't have any illusions.
Right. It's the great illuminator.
Exactly. So, you know, that can be a great thing and that can also be an uncomfortable thing, depending, because revealing illusions in your life can be painful, right? And so anyway, my marriage fell apart after that, and basically all the men in my life were disappearing. My dad wasn't there, my husband wasn't there, one of my brothers had kind of he was mad at me for getting divorced and he wasn't speaking to me. So I really had to find that sun in myself. Like I had to do all the so-called more masculine things. Like I hadn't been paying taxes. My husband had been taking care of that. I had never gotten a mortgage, applied for a mortgage myself. I had never bought a car on my own. All of those things I had to learn to do by myself. And so the sun, it was also a pretty exciting time too, because I was like rediscovering myself in a way, and I was setting out on this new life. And I did have this sense through the whole kind of painful process that like what was happening was good and it was for the best. It was positive. So I really feel like, you know, if I had had an overall tarot card reading at that time, it would have had the sun, it would have had the tower, um, it would have had death and maybe the moon, you know, it would have been a really intense reading, but the sun would have been there like shining over the whole thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That cloud forest sounds like not a bad place to live for a while too.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. It was talk about Shakti. It was the most Shakti filled place I've ever been.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing when we have those male figures in our life, just like that masculine generosity. And that, like, I used to have that in a music teacher, and he just believed in me so much, and he like pushed me, and he kind of gave me so much provision, and he was my mentor and all these kind of things for like 4 years. And then I had to like kind of, I'm still learning how to like find that place in myself where we're being our own guide and our own mentor, kind of like you said, like learning to do all the things by yourself. And it's not that we have to do it in a real armored way, like we have our armor on and we can't let any man help us now. But it's just that maybe we need to have the skill in case the man isn't there, but then we can absolutely let in the sun, so to speak, and let in the sun when it's there.
Yeah, and as far as your music teacher, I do kind of feel that like really generous, supportive, masculine energy that it does sometimes kind of have to sacrifice itself, meaning that it has to leave your life, right, so that you can learn to find that within yourself, which is really a beautiful idea. I mean, it's what parenting is really all about. It's like, okay, I'm here like learning to ride a bike. Okay, I've got the back of your bike and I'm running along behind you, but I'm going to have to let go at a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really poignant about that. It's sad, it's so sad when you lose that son in your life, but it's also so life generating. And so what's the word? Like empowering.
Yes. And I like life generating too, because that is the masculine gift, is the seed. The seed, I mean, not in a, well, in a physical way, but and also in a metaphysical, I guess, way, psychological, mythical. When he sacrificed, or I guess that part of the myth, he had to leave my life and I had to move on and go by myself. What I noticed was I was so friggin' empowered in my community when I came back home, because I was living out west and then I came back to the Midwest, and gosh, I was able to like hire musicians, no problem. I was able to book shows and play on stages and bars in front of people and like play festivals, and it was just like no big deal. Whereas I would have never been able to do all that before I met him.
That is really beautiful. I mean, the casting of seeds and the sacrifices. I mean, and this is also more feminine. This can be feminine or masculine.
Yeah.
But like a flower that's growing, it fruits and then it flowers and then it develops seeds and it casts its seeds and then it dies, and the new seeds bloom and do their thing.
The generative principle. So let's do number 4. Are there any movies or pop culture influences that remind you of the sun archetype?
Yeah, it's funny. Have you seen the movie Sideways?
I don't think I have. I know of it. I don't think I've seen.
Okay. You have to see it. It's about these two men. One of them is like an 8th grade English teacher and he's trying to get this book published and he's not having any success. And he's like an anti-sun really figure. And he's obsessed with wine. Wine is a like sun-like beverage, with the grapes and everything. So they go to wine country and his friend is like this really goofy kind of, he's like the fool archetype in the tarot. And they his friend is getting married, and so they go off on this trip like before his friend gets married, and they get into all these, you know, difficult romantic situations with these two women. And anyway, the anti-sun character, the main character, at the end, he doesn't get his book published. He never achieves the worldly success and recognition that he's really wanting. But he meets this woman, and she kind of she reads his book manuscript and she loves it, and she becomes the sun for him. And so at the end, it's like an alternative version of the sun. Like he finds fulfillment and happiness because this woman actually sees him for who he is, and he can be authentic rather than always trying to be somebody who he's not. And authenticity is a word that I would definitely use with the sun card.
Definitely. Yeah, that just gave me chills.
It's a great film. I think it came out in the 90s. And it's hilarious. It's very, very funny, and also just sweet and touching.
I just pulled up the picture of it on my phone. Yeah, it looks really, really
Oh,
cool.
yeah. Yeah.
Check that out. You know, when I think of the sun archetype for movies, I think of the movie Annie.
Oh, yeah.
Like that song, the song,
Definitely.
tomorrow. It has such a strong like father, the whole Daddy Warbucks thing, and the whole like back in the 80s, that was kind of like everybody's mind was really on making money and capitalism.
Right. Yeah. Does it not feel like that anymore?
I know, actually, I'm like, well, I mean, personally speaking, yeah, I'm definitely still kind of in that place, but I'm trying to figure out how to do it altruistically instead of coming from this self-serving, like urgent place. And that's always kind of where I'm at with it lately.
Well, yeah, that's good. I mean, I think the attitude of money and I don't care what the cost is, and I just want it for myself, and screw everybody else, and that's a very destructive kind of attitude. I don't think that that's really the mindset. The mindset is more like, okay, there's enough for everybody. There's lots of abundance everywhere, and let's just all attract that to ourselves. I mean, it's not that easy, of course. It's a very complicated subject, but
yeah, but that's kind of the essence of the sun archetype, though, isn't it? That there's enough for everybody.
oh, right. Yeah. There's some saying, there's a quote, you've probably heard it. It's like the sun shines on the just and the unjust. The sun shines on everybody equally. It doesn't discriminate. It's like its light is there for everyone. And I think that's so beautiful about the sun.
Yeah, me too. I like what you said about the woman believing in him in the movie, and just how nourishing that can be to have someone believe in you, and how many people maybe don't have that. I know it changed my life completely to have that. I was just a shy little thing, and I was so shy, and like, I would hunch. I couldn't even stand up straight most of the time when I was young, and I would just like play piano, and like he heard me singing, and like he like just like exclaimed like such faith and belief in me and vocally, and just wouldn't let me quit, and like taught me how to believe in myself more.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that.
Mhm.
I've been doing this practice of sun gazing. I haven't actually been doing the real practice of sun gazing, which, to do that, you gaze at the sun. It's like the hour, right after it comes up, and then the hour before it sets, and you stare at it. Actually, you start out with a few seconds and then you work your way up. But what I've been doing is more just a closed eyes sun gazing, where I just stand, and gaze at the sun, and I'll have my palms open because I'll just be visualizing those kind of lotus flowers in the palms of the hands, like blooming. So I'll have my hands open, letting the sun kind of touch that part, and like really just absorbing the energy um, of the sun and focusing on. I mean, there's really three chakras. The third eye, like the pineal gland, which is a little pine cone shaped gland in like the center of the skull, and then the heart chakra and the solar plexus too. Those are all good places to visualize the sun inside your body. And I feel like it's just like this, it just generates a lot of energy in my body and makes me more optimistic. And so
a funny story about sun gazing. So I used to work at this health food store in Arizona, and this Indian man came in one day and he seemed very spiritual. Like he looked like one of those yogis who lives in the Himalayas and he was quite older, and I think he had gray hair. And I just remember thinking, oh, well, that's a true mystic. Like, what's he doing here? I got to find out about him. And so I found out that he was giving a talk on sun gazing that night.
wow.
So I was like, oh, cool. I don't have anything to do. I'm going to stay and check it out. So I sat through his talk and learned that like NASA was studying this guy. And he was one of the first, I guess, people to start teaching it.
Oh, wow.
He was teaching us how to do it and how it helped people reduce their weight. And I guess like, yeah, NASA was studying it and had cameras on him and stuff, I guess.
That's cool. I've heard about some sadhus in India who can sun gaze and they don't have to eat.
That's it. That's why they were studying him, because he didn't eat. He told us he drank coffee, water, and milk. That was like his diet. And I remember too, like somebody in the crowd raised their hand and said, like, what about the moon? What about gazing at the moon? And he completely dismissed it. He was like, oh, that'll make you crazy.
Well, yeah. Well, I do know people who moonbathe though, right? Yeah.
I love moon bathing. To me, it feels relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's benefits to that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the sun, it's so cool how the sun and moon work together. Like even right now, it's a full moon today, and we're getting the most, I guess the moon has her own way of like distributing that solar light to us as illumination. Like it's like a more distilled kind of wisdom that I know for me, it looks like waking up in the middle of the night with like insomnia, but having these like striking like insights come through, and it's like, whoa, that's intense. Like it only happens like on full moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is beautiful how they have that balance. And that just reminds me of some of the like, I mean, there is a shadow side of the sun. It does cast shadows, right? So yeah, like I was thinking about that myth of Icarus, who was, that Greek myth of the guy who was seeking fame and glory, and he was like, I'm gonna fly close to the sun, and like glued these feathers on his body, and then he got close to the sun and the sun just like melted all the glue and he went plunging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's really humbling, isn't it? It's like, can you really take the heat of what your desire entails? Or maybe that's the kind of thing. Or
Ooh, I like that a lot. Yeah, the higher you reach, the further you fall, right?
yeah.
Which isn't to say that you shouldn't reach high. I mean, like the star archetype, which is, just a few before the sun, is like reach for the stars.
Yeah. There's a similar myth in, I guess, Hinduism or Vedic. Oh no, I don't think it's Vedic, but it's I'll just say in the yoga tradition, the Indian wisdom tradition. I'll say the Hanuman story. Have you heard of the Hanuman, the deity, the monkey deity?
I've heard of him. I know there's a pose named after him.
Yeah, well, I guess his mythology, there's a myth about him that's very similar to Icarus, where he wanted to take a bite. He thought the sun was a mango, and so he like took a huge leap up to take a bite out of it. And then the sun, like, kind of humbled him, and like I think the sun like smacked him and broke his jaw or something, or like he fell down and had a broken jaw. But then, like they say later, he was also able to leap across the ocean with a ring in his mouth to assist Ram, who is another mythic figure deity, who's this totally kind of like a Christ figure. It was all about that love, bringing love to the world and making things right again when they were all, going bad.
Okay, Hanuman. Interesting. I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taking it. That's really childlike too. Like the sun is a mango and I'm gonna jump up and take a bite out of it. That's a very childlike vision. Yeah.
Well, this was so fun. And is there anything else to share in under 45 seconds that you love about the sun?
I don't know. The sun's always there, even when it's behind the clouds, and just sun gaze. I guess that's what I'm gonna leave people with. Try it.
Yeah, I like your lotus flower thing. That just felt nice, kind of imagining that.
Yeah.
Lotus palms, taking in the sun, and heart. You said third eye, heart, and
Solar plexus.
solar plexus. Oh, duh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great talking with you, Tara.
You too, Kelly. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support and explore my work further, you can subscribe to patreon.com/readingsandrituals.